Good morning, everyone. It's so good to be with you this morning. I am a very good friend of Reverend Laura's, and she speaks so often of this community as one of power and promise. And so I feel as if I know you a little bit already. And so it is just my greatest joy to be worshiping with you on this Sunday morning. I want to begin our time together with a story that comes to us from the peoples of the Great Lakes, those native peoples. They tell a creation story called the Sky Woman. And it is told in many different forms, many different ways. But I am going to use the story as recounted by the writer, naturalist, Robin Wall Kimmerer. She wrote a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, and if you have not read it, you should. It is a beautiful, beautiful collection of essays. And so I bring you the story of Sky Woman as told by Robin Kimmerer. In the beginning, there was the sky world. And one day, a woman fell through a hole in the sky. She pirouetted through that shaft of light that suddenly appeared in the darkness like a maple leaf spinning in the autumn breeze. Her falling took a long, long time. Maybe she fell in fear. Maybe she fell in a little bit of hope. Maybe it was a little bit of both. But in her hand, she clutched a bundle. She thought as she fell that she was going to fall into a black abyss. But in that darkness, so many eyes were gazing up at this shaft of light that had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. All those eyes in that black water below saw a dust mote that seemed to then turn into a maple seed, that seemed to then turn into a woman, Sky Woman, who was falling and falling closer and closer, her arms outstretched, her hair billowing out behind her. The geese of the group knew immediately that they had to catch her, to help her. And so they flew up from the water like geese music, and they came and soared around her and caught her in a beautiful feathery embrace. Oh, Sky Woman was so grateful for this gentle landing. The geese knew that they could not hold her forever, and so they called a council of all the creatures of the waters to talk about how they should proceed. There were loon and otter and beaver and sturgeon and all forms of water, fowl and fish. A turtle swam by and said, "Step onto my back, dear woman. I am strong." And Sky Woman was so grateful for a solid place to land her feet. She stood there as she watched the council so generously talk of how they might be of help to this stranger that had somehow appeared in their midst. It was decided that the Sky Woman needed land. And so they thought, we think we remember vaguely some story or some idea that there is some mud at the very, very bottom of the water. We should go and get it. And so all the great swimmers of those gathered, each said, "Yes, I will dive for that mud." The first was the loon. The loon dove deep into the water, and everyone waited to see what would happen. It didn't take long before the loon came up out of the water, shooting up from the surface, gasping for breath. Oh, the water was so deep, and there was no way to get to that so precious mud. Each one after another, tried. The otter, the beaver, the sturgeon, each and all, but all of them came up empty-handed, gasping for breath, and their heads ringing with the pressure of the water. Finally, it was only the muskrat who was left, the weak little muskrat who said, "I will try." The council wished him well, but in their heart of hearts, they were very doubtful about whether or not the muskrat would be successful. And so the muskrat dove down below the surface, his little back legs flailing away. And the council waited for a very, very long time. They waited and waited and waited. And then suddenly a little stream of bubbles broke the surface, followed by the limp body of the dear muskrat. All of the friends of that dear muskrat, the fish and the fowl, mourned his great sacrifice to try and help Sky Woman. And then in that time of tears, they saw the palm, the little paw of the muskrat open, and in it, mud. Mud. All of a sudden they said, "Quick, take that mud, put it over the back of the turtle." And so the Sky Woman took the mud from the muskrat's paw and began to spread the mud across the back of the turtle. She was so moved by this generosity of spirit that had come to her from animals and creatures that she had never known, that she began to dance on the back of the turtle, spreading that mud far and wide, until finally it became Turtle Island, the home of the Great Lakes people. Now everyone knows that a house guest does not come to a party empty-handed. And neither had the Sky Woman. Do you remember that when she fell from the sky, she clutched a bundle in her hand? Well, as she began to fall through the hole in the sky, she reached for the tree of life, grabbing branches, seeds, and grass. And then, as she stood on that beautiful stretching landscape of mud on the turtle's back, she spread those seeds, those branches, that love of the tree of life. And everything brown turned to green. This is the story of how the world began. Through generosity, sacrifice, and thanksgiving. Today, I wanted to tell some creation stories because we are living through such confounding and profoundly heart-rending times, and the stories we tell matter. Whether we are aware of it or not, creation stories are embedded in the frameworks of how we live, how we carry ourselves in the world, how we feel and sense ourselves. I wanted to tell some creation stories to invite or perhaps tempt each one of us to take a chance on restoring how we think about the way things work, what priorities we set, and to cast our lot with those who age after age perversely and with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. We've heard one creation story already, the instruction story of Sky Woman, told in many forms by the native peoples of the Great Lakes and recounted by Robin Wall Kimmerer. As I listened to that story, it seems to me that creation begins with dangerous opportunity. A woman falling through the sky in fear or perhaps hope or maybe a little bit of both. Creation emerges from collaboration and diving deep. Creation requires risk-taking and mutuality. Creation is generosity, sacrifice, and thanksgiving, all rolled into one. I hear the story of Sky Woman and my breathing becomes so much easier. What about you? I relax. I sense trust welling up inside of me. I look at my neighbors, human, animal, plant, fish, and fowl who accompany me on this planet, and a still small voice whispers in my ear, we can do this. It won't be easy, but I think we can do this. I am one of many, offering myself to something bigger. Creation is generosity, sacrifice, and thanksgiving, all rolled into one. I hear this story and wonder what our world would look like if this was the story of creation embedded in the frameworks of our society, the story that shaped our consciousness and how we set our priorities. Instead, the creation story told over and over again, not literally, but embedded in our sense of right and wrong, what is possible and impossible, what creation is here for, what progress means, is the one that comes to us from our Protestant forebears and is found in the library of books called the Bible. There are more than 20 creation stories strewn throughout the Bible. So you would think with all those choices, we would logically start with the first one. That would be the one we would remember. The one that goes, God calls up all that we see and don't see from the soup of nothingness. Light, dark, sun, moon, earth, water, trees, plants, fish, fowl, and human. And God calls it good. Everything is good. Everything is so good. That's the first creation story in the Bible. But the one we come back to over and over again is actually the second creation story in the Bible. That's the story that people remember. Because that is a story that serves the purposes of dominance, of hierarchies, of right and wrong, and Christian empire. It is the second creation story that served the purposes of the 4th century Christians as they argued about whether or not Jesus was God, and therefore capable of saving humanity from original sin, as told in the second creation story. It is the second story that served them and serves us. It serves this national mythology of dominance and hierarchies that haunts our psyches and allows us to ignore the pain and suffering of our fellow beings on this earth. The creation story we all know, or think we know, is the second creation story of Adam and Eve. God forms first man from the red dust of the earth before any plant or herb sprung from the ground. God blew into Adam's nostrils and gave him life. And then God creates a paradise in Eden. It is full of trees and all manner of living things, with the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil at its center. 2 trees. All living things were man's to use and care for, except the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Adam is told, if you eat from that tree, you're dead. God realizes it's not good for man to be alone, and so creates all the animals, and still man is wanting of a helper, a partner in creation. So God puts Adam to sleep, takes a rib from his chest, and forms first woman, bone of bone and flesh of flesh. All was well and good until the snake, that crafty creature, entices woman to eat from the forbidden tree. You won't die, the snake says. God knows the moment you eat from that tree, you'll see how the world really is. You'll be just like God, knowing everything, ranging all the way from good to evil. When the woman saw that the tree looked like some pretty good eating and realized what she would get out of it, she'd know everything, she took and ate the fruit and then gave some to her husband, and he ate. 4 things happened with that fateful bite. Their eyes are opened. They see the world with their own eyes, which isn't all bad. They understand themselves as naked. A way of shame-free living is lost. Adam and Eve try to cover that shame, and they hide from God. Of course, God finds them. God is God, after all. So man and woman and snake are judged and sentenced. The snake is cursed among all animals and made to slink on its belly and eat dirt. The woman is sentenced with pain in childbearing and to be ruled by her husband. The man is told, because of you, the ground, the very ground is cursed. Getting food from the ground will be as painful as having babies is for your wife. You'll be working in pain your whole life long. Now, God isn't all bad. God makes some clothes for them, but then God realizes, hey, wait just a doggone minute. The man has become like one of us, capable of knowing everything ranging from good to evil. What if he should reach out and take from the fruit of the tree of life? Well, then he would live forever. We can't have that. So God banishes Adam and Eve from the garden. They live as exiles, never quite belonging anywhere, punished with hard labor and now death as its ultimate end point. In one analysis found in the New Interpreter's Bible, the author asked, what is the effects of this sentencing? Every conceivable relationship has been disrupted among animals, between an animal and humans, between the ground and humans, between human beings and God, between an animal and God, within the individual, shame. More abstractly, one could speak of humiliation, domination and subordination, conflict, suffering, and struggle. The sentences touch every aspect of human life. Disharmony reigns supreme. The Christian Protestants who came to this part of the world as part of European expansionism brought this creation story with them as fact. They didn't understand it as metaphor. They understood this story as the basis of how things are. Creation may begin in benevolence, but there are stipulations. Step over the line and you will suffer severe consequences. Domination and subordination is the operating system of life. God over man, man over woman, woman over snake. Humanity does not collaborate with nature or even quite belong to it. We are aliens, exiles. Creation is stingy, and hardship is our lot. I hear this story, and my breathing gets very, very constricted. What about you? I feel such a sense of separation and hopelessness. I feel like I'm on my own. And good luck, because hardship is my lot. Now, some of my Jewish and Christian colleagues or people well-versed in the Bible may be cringing right now. There is no nuance in this telling, no contextualization, no counterbalance of the first creation story to mitigate the harsh character of the second. The two creation stories in the book of Genesis are placed together, side by side, for a reason. They are meant to be read and understood together. But it is the second creation story that has been embedded as and used as source material for our societal structures of domination, racism, sexism, ecological exploitation, and our world orientation, and why I tell it this way. Robin Kimmerer says in Braiding Sweetgrass, like creation stories everywhere, cosmologies are a source of identity and orientation in the world. They tell us who we are. We are inevitably shaped by them, no matter how distant they may be in our consciousness. One story leads to the generous embrace of the living world, the other to banishment. One woman is our ancestral gardener, a co-creator in this good green world. The other was an exile, just passing through an alien world on her rough road to her real home in heaven. And then they met, the offspring of Sky Woman and the children of Eve. And the land around us bears the scars of that meeting. We are living in such disorienting times where people are feeling incredibly isolated and profoundly interconnected. We can see with our own eyes where the story of humiliation, domination, and subordination, suffering and struggle has gotten us. The pandemic, the social upheaval has made the fault lines of our cosmologies and our orientation to the world abundantly clear. Disharmony reigns supreme. We could talk about this time in history as banishment, as our rightful comeuppance. Or could we entertain the idea that this is a time of dangerous opportunity, as we fall through the sky wondering what we will find in the vast abyss below? I, for one, would not know what I would do with myself if I didn't have a faith community, if I didn't sense that there was a group of eyes looking up to that shaft of light as I fall into their embrace, or that group that sets me firmly on a turtle's back until I can figure out what I should do next. I don't know what I would do without a community of hope that consistently and publicly reminds me to dive deep, to grow my soul, to live with generosity and compassion for myself and my neighbors, and to take my place in reconstituting the world. And this is where the creation story gets very personal for me. There is no way to live into the new world, to work for racial justice, to engage in environmental reimagining, to enter the tough conversations of our times and the real work of transforming the world without bumbling around, without making some really big mistakes, without diving deep and coming up empty. But when the mistakes happen, when my clumsiness gets the best of me, when I'm sitting in the heat of justified pushback at my privilege and my whiteness, I have to resist the creation story of my Protestant upbringing. I have to resist the notion that creation is benevolent unless you make a mistake. And then the consequences are severe. Banishment is justifiable. Banishment is a justifiable sentence. The creation story tells me submission is my lot in life as a woman, that I am not worthy of connection or belonging. The story tells me that creation is stingy and hardship is life, so get used to it. The reverberations of that Protestant creation story wakes me up at night. The creation story makes me want to withdraw and withhold, not to lean in. When I'm in the thick of it, I don't think I'm telling myself that creation story, but I am. When I make a mistake and I take myself out back to the shame shack that I have in my backyard and I start in on my punishment, it actually feels right. It feels like I'm doing the right thing. Banishment and exile feel right. That's how deeply embedded this creation story is in my psyche. That's how risky it is to be with you this morning and say, we need a different story. To create a more life-giving creation story as the true north for our compass as we navigate our way forward. A story that wisely asks, is whatever we are engaged in a collaborative effort? Does it ask us to dive deep? Is there a sense of mutuality and love at its core? Is there risk-taking and sacrifice? And is it shared? Not equally, but equitably, because our American life has been built on great harm and violence to so many groups, much more than equality ever was. Does this endeavor feel generous? Does it make you want to dance in gratitude and thanksgiving? In these times of lockdown, standing 6 feet apart and mask upon mask, it's hard to figure out what to do or what to be. But one thing I know for sure, practicing generosity is not only a countercultural effort, it creates a new world. Generosity creates a new world for me and for you, for our communities, the community that lives in our house, the community down the block, and the community across the world. As people of faith, let us risk a new story, a story that helps us breathe a little easier, that encourages an open heart and a welling up of trust. Let us cast our lot with those who age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world with generosity, sacrifice, and thanksgiving, all rolled into one. May it be so, and amen.